Hey, welcome to my channel. I'm Tara Jones-Williamson. Thank you so much for joining me for this video series where I talk about how I created an urban backyard garden. So with the help of friends and family, we got it done in a matter of months. So as you can see, I have a backyard that is a nice size, and I chose a plot of land that it was originally covered with a lot of tall grass, a lot of wildflowers, a lot of weeds, okay? And so my cousin, we rented out a tiller from Home Depot, and my cousin was able to till this whole area. And then in the next scene, you'll see that I am laying landscape fabric. So one thing about this garden, when I first started, I had a vision for my garden. And one thing that was not in it was a ton of weeds, right? So I created a foundation of where I laid some heavy duty landscape fabric and then I laid some mulch on top of it so that I don't have to constantly worry about weeding my garden. I can focus on planting. I can focus on turning over the garden, really developing the soil in the raised beds, harvesting, teaching my children different techniques and tricks, and watering and fertilizing. Those are the things I wanted to focus on. And so as you see on your screen, I'm laying the landscape fabric with the help of my daughter. We did some heavy duty landscape fabric and used landscape staples to hold it down. Now, this was in mid-April here in Michigan, and so the ground is cold and it is cold outside, but not too cold to where you can't work, right? And so with the help of a couple of breaks, we got this done in about 2 hours. Again, definitely a labor of love that you have to do once, and then you'll be able to utilize the space for years to come. So let's talk about for a minute why I started this garden and what prompted me to start a garden. So since I was little, I've always wanted a backyard garden. And I'm living in a rental right now, which is a duplex. And there was this big patch of, again, wild grass, wildflowers and weeds and everything else. And my landlord was like, you can do what you want. It's on your land, you can do what you want with it. So I started my garden and starting to bring to fruition the garden that I wanted ever since I was a child. Now, my paternal grandfather was a gardener. He had a garden, God rest his soul. He had a garden. And when I say urban, I mean urban garden. He lived in the middle of this city, right on the outskirts of downtown Grand Rapids. I live kind of like in a suburban neighborhood. He lived in a super urban neighborhood, and he had an amazing garden, and everybody in the neighborhood loved his garden. And he always gave fruits and vegetables out of that garden. And even now, my grandmother still lives on lives in that house and lives on that land. And there's still one of his peach trees growing there, although the garden isn't there anymore. And so when I was younger, I spent a lot of time with my paternal grandparents while my parents worked. And I was like in daycare or in preschool or in kindergarten where you only went half a day. My grandparents would come and get me, and I would spend the rest of the day with them. And so I was always so enamored with his garden and helping him harvest stuff and do things and sow and just do different things in the garden. And so my love for it started there. And then when I was 12 years old, I met my maternal great-great-grandmother, so my mother's grandmother, and she was a sharecropper. And actually, when we went to go visit her in Thomasville, Georgia, she was still living on the property where she was once enslaved, and then she was, turned into a sharecropper where she had her own land, on that plantation. She had her own crops, her own house, and everything, and she was still living in it. When I met my great grandmother, she was 104 years old, and she died at 106. And so it was a blessing to be able to meet her. And so she was just such a vibrant woman to the day she died. She was mobile. She lived alone. She had a dog. Even at 104 years old, she did not need any assistance. She was not sickly. And one of the major things she did was live off her land, right? She ate off her land. And so those two things from my past really prompted me to desire having a backyard garden and a beautiful garden to where I can eat 80% plant-based, and optimize my health. If you've known me for a little while, watched any of my videos or content, you know that right now I'm struggling with a autoimmune disorder that's attacking my thyroid, and I'm also struggling with eczema, right? And because of the thyroidism, I've been struggling with a couple of miscarriages. And so I am just now more than ever excited to really optimize my health, really take my health seriously, really watch what I'm putting into my body, really eat clean and healthy. And so not only was that desire from a child to have a garden come into fruition, but also the ability to grow my own food, to grow my own fruits and vegetables to where I can just sustain my healthy eating habits on my own land, right? If they start playing like they have been with the food in the stores and different things like that, I could be self-sufficient in supplying my own herbs, my own greens, my own lettuces, my own fruits, my own vegetables that I love to eat. And so that's what really prompted me to start this backyard garden. Now, when did I get started? How did I get started? I've been asked that a couple of times, right? So I'm just going to I kind of took some notes and I listed kind of what happened and how I went through this process. So in January of 2023, I really decided, like I said, you know what, this is the year I'm going to stop putting this off. I decided to start my backyard garden. And so the first thing that I did was I set a budget for how much I wanted to spend. Now, notice I did not say I set a budget based on what things cost. No. I set a budget and say, according to what I want to spend, according to my family's finances, this is how much I'm willing to set aside to create a backyard garden. Okay. Then the next thing I did was I went to Dollar Tree, actually, because at the end of January, they started putting out seeds and seed packets. And so I went to Dollar Tree and I grabbed a bunch of seeds. I got some of everything, winter and fall/spring season type seeds for plants. So I got carrots and onions and tomatoes and cauliflower, anything you think of, lettuces, because Dollar Tree seeds, they work, they germinate, and they have like the basis of a garden that you will need. The radishes, the carrots, the onions, the leafy greens, the broccoli, your cauliflower, your zucchini, your cucumber, they have it all, right? And so I said, I'm going to get these $4 packets and I'm going to just stock up on those. The next thing that I did, and this is still in January, I started winter sowing or winter jug sowing. At this point, I was on YouTube heavy and I was like, okay, I live in Michigan. How can I garden? So I started to research what people around here in Michigan or in Zone 5B, Zone 6A, what they typically do to start a garden, to garden successfully every year with a short growing season, with a cold, cooler climate. But we have hot summers, right? Like that temperature swing. What is the most successful way to garden? So I took a lot of notes and I started sowing my seeds in winter sowing jugs. You can look that up on YouTube if you're not familiar with it. All right. So then the next thing that I did is I researched on YouTube again. Hey, YouTube University, right? I looked up how to build a backyard garden for free or for cheap. Now, keep in mind, I do have money set aside to build out this garden, but it was, I don't want to disclose how much because I don't want to, show you that, oh, you have to spend a certain amount of money. No, I want you to take what I did and I want you to get creative with it. And I want you to research and find your own resources on how to build your own backyard garden for free or for cheap. That is my goal. And so I don't want you to use my number as a marker for you, but just know it wasn't a lot, period. So I researched on YouTube free and cheap ways to build a backyard garden. And I took note on these videos of what I wanted, what I didn't want, it, the aesthetics that I like and didn't like, because, there are some people on YouTube who build a free garden, but they have a lot of weeds. Like, they did not till nothing. They didn't weed. They don't use mulch. They didn't use fencing. Like, they didn't use anything. They just got straight into the dirt and kept it like that, right? And then there were some people who, built a garden on a budget to where they got more of the aesthetics involved into their garden, and they had to spend a little bit of money, but not as much as if you are just going out buying the latest and greatest, right? So then the next thing that I did was I kind of got a vision for my garden. I said, okay, after looking at these videos, created a list of what I wanted, what I didn't want. I kind of mapped it out on a piece of paper. All right, this is the size I want it to be. These are how many raised beds I want. This is what I want to grow in there, type of thing. So then I shopped around. Now, when I shopped around, the first thing that I did was I went to free places first. So the biggest thing that I used was Facebook Marketplace. And then I used the free groups in my area. So I live in Grand Rapids, Michigan. There are about 4 or 5 free groups where people will post things that they no longer need and no longer want. And then other people will post like, hey, I'm looking for this. Does anybody have this that they just have laying around? And so I did that first. I got a vision for my garden. I kind of figured out what tools and supplies and resources and things that I needed, and I started posting in there first. I started saying, hey, does anybody have any extra wood laying around? Does anybody have any landscape pavers? Does anybody have any mulch available? Any soil that they have laying around, any containers for container gardening, any seeds. I got so many seeds for free from people. And even one woman, God bless her, she made me a gardening care package where she gave me a notebook to start gardening. She gave me a gardening bag, some tools. So my first set of gardening tools and shears. She gave me some seeds. She gave me some planters, labels. Oh my goodness, I was just so thankful for her because she really helps ignite what it was that I was trying to do. So I was so thankful for that. So, I just really utilized the free groups and the Facebook Marketplace that had stuff either for free or for really cheap that I can use in order to build my backyard garden. And then I went on places like Menards, Home Depot, and Lowe's. Unfortunately, we were starting to get into the spring because I started collecting items from about beginning of February to April. And that is gardening preparation season, and so things weren't going to be on clearance because they know people are about to start buying this stuff. And so unfortunately, the things that I did have to buy were not discounted, but they were still budget friendly. Okay, so that was pretty cool. And then I just started collecting those items in my garden or in my garage until it was time to plant out in April. Now in April, here in Michigan, it's still cold. The ground is still kind of tough. It's, as you can see in this video, there's no leaves on the tree. It is still bare outside, but there is no snow. And so I'm able to do the laborious part, right? So here's the thing about gardening and building the infrastructure that I noticed. Either you have to have the time and the sweat equity, or you have to have the money to pay somebody, right? And so me, my cousin, my husband, my kids, my sister, my brother, my nieces and nephews, whoever I can get on the day I needed help, I enlisted them for help, and we just put the time in to build this backyard garden versus me paying somebody who's a contractor or who's a landscaper or who's a gardener or who is a handyman to come do it for me. That would be hundreds of thousands of dollars out of pocket versus just spending a couple of hours every day when it's a nice day outside, when there's no snow on the ground, when it's not raining, when, the sun is out. We're able to kind of get down into the nitty gritty and just do what we got to do, right? And so that is what I did. And so we marked off this area, 30 feet by 45 feet. We tilled the entire area. He tilled it. And unfortunately, the weekend that The weekend in April in which he tilled the garden was like that fluke weekend where it got to like 80 degrees outside, full sun. And so we were hot. Like, this day was a couple of days after the tilling of the garden, and it looks all cold. You see, we got our gloves on. My daughter has her coat on because it was cold. But the weekend before, when we actually tilled it, we were out there sweating because this area was on like a little slant, and we tried to kind of minimize that slant as much as possible. And so he tilled the ground, and I was like moving the dirt from the high side of it to the low side to kind of even it out as much as possible. And oh my goodness, we were just so tired and sweaty. It was crazy, but we got it done. We got it done, right? And so we used the fencing and put it up using T-posts and deer fencing and fishing line. And so it was a very inexpensive way to put up fencing. As you can see, once those trees fill in, we have a lot of deer. We have a lot of rabbits, raccoons, chipmunks, all that good stuff around here, right? And so I wanted to have some type of barrier, especially for the deer, not to get in. And later you'll see in my later in my series, you'll see that once the fencing was fully done, that I put cayenne pepper all around the exterior of the 30 by 45 foot garden, out just right outside the fence, along the bottom fence line, so that burrowing animals and burrowing or climbing animals would be like, I am not trying to dig my way under this fence. Like, I do not want to get in there, because they hate cayenne pepper. And I am recording this in August. I built this in April, but I'm recording this voiceover in August, and I have not had one incident of a raccoon, a squirrel, a deer, anything get into my garden and eat anything. Not one thing. Now, the Japanese beetles, on the other hand, they've been giving me a run for my money, but but the deer and the other wildlife, they haven't touched it, because that cayenne pepper keeps them out of it. Thank you so much for watching this video. This is the ending of it, to where it was fully covered with landscape fabric. And then in the next video, I am going to show you how we put down the mulch and how we built the garden beds.